Lucy, when the discussion starts, I'll probably also just turn off my camera as well so that it's not distracting for others. Yeah.
Sure. Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's session. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, based on the location you are presently in. I am Arnisha from the Digital Library team. Thank you for joining today's session. As you know, we are doing a Readers Club session today. That means we all will be talking with each other. It's a chance to meet each other. So you can switch on your cameras and so that we can see each other as well. A few housekeeping rules before we start the session. The session will be recorded because there are participants from across the globe and not everyone will be able to join today because of the time difference. So we will be recording the session and sharing with them. In case if you have any issues with the recording, you can switch off your camera for that reason, or you can connect with me directly. And apart from that, the chat section, we will be chatting with each other in the Q&A section and not the chat section because the chat section is disabled. The Q&A section is monitored. So we will be posting posting questions and you can post your comments here. While we are doing an introduction session, you can also put in from where you have joined with us today. With that, I will be delighted to introduce you to a very special guest today, Ben Lawton from British Council, Pakistan. Ben has joined the British Council Pakistan team as Deputy Director in October 2025, bringing nearly 20 years of experience in cultural relations and international collaboration. He has led British Council work across Middle East and North Africa as country director in Libya, Iraq, and Morocco, building strategic partnerships and delivering impactful programs in challenging contexts. Committed to fostering mutual understanding and sustainable development, Ben now drives innovation and collaboration in Pakistan, strengthening the British Council's role as a trusted partner in education and culture. With that, I'll request Ben to come in and share a few words about Digital Library and also introduce us to the author today. Thank you, Ben. Thank you again for coming to us, coming in this session today. Thank you. Over to you, Ben.
Arnisha, thank you very much for that introduction. It sounds very grand. I'd just like to say, firstly, it's a real pleasure to me to be able to join the Digital Library Readers Club community today, and the privilege of talking a little bit about the library and introducing Lucy Butters for what I'm sure will be a fascinating and really interesting hour together. As Anisha mentioned, the British Council's digital library is really important to us, and it's so encouraging to see so many people here joining the Readers Club. The library itself is available in over 30 countries, and there are over 117,000 of us now registered as members to it. And as you know, the library houses material for a wide spectrum of different people, from those avid readers like yourselves to people occasionally like me who read for less regularly. And it's a great resource that helps people with professional and academic growth, but also great entertainment at everyone's fingertips, and particularly high quality resources from the UK. Community, I think, for our digital library, as with every library, is a really important part of our work. And, you as the Readers Club are particularly important. And I know my colleagues focus a lot on how to make sure that there are really interesting talks, book reads and storytelling sessions throughout the year that keep that whole community around the library engaged. And I'd like really to thank my library colleagues particularly for all their work to arrange these, and to thank you all for coming and joining today for what I know will be a really interesting discussion to explore how to communicate, connect and collaborate effectively across different cultures, which I think we all agree is such a vital skill now as it always has been, but increasingly. It's my pleasure also to introduce Lucy. And today we welcome Lucy Butters, who is a global expert in cultural intelligence. Her book, Cultural Intelligence in Practice, draws on more than 2 years of interviews with global experts who use cultural intelligence to strengthen their leadership, inclusion, and international effectiveness. And her book has been praised by, for example, the British Council's own Vice Chair, Baroness Wendy Alexander, who called it the one book on cultural intelligence you should all read. So Lucy began her career in academia before joining the British Council, where she led international programs, including leadership initiatives across 9 Arab countries and Scotland. And since 2010, through her company LMB Limited, she's focused on training and coaching in inclusion leadership and global working. Lucy is, I think, a lifelong lover of books, thanks perhaps to her first job in her local library, and she's delighted to be here today from her home in sunny Glasgow. So without further comment from me, please can we welcome Lucy Butters for the rest of our talk today. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that lovely introduction, Ben. And not so sunny Glasgow in Scotland, I have to say. And I have a real warm sense of lots of circles coming together. My first job was in my local library in the northeast of Scotland, where I worked there. Where I developed a very eclectic sense of reading, because I would just borrow from every part of the library because I was there every Saturday. And I think that helped open my eyes to the world. And that continued working with the British Council, where we worked with colleagues all around the world. You just had to make things work. And there was a real sense of you didn't do anything yourself. You always looked out to find partners. And that's very much how I approached writing my book as well. You know, I knew that I wanted to do something on how we develop ourselves, how we develop others to thrive and build better organizations and communities around us. And I knew that the way to do that is to reach out, which I think is a very British Council way of thinking about things, which I have taken away with me, which led to me reaching out to 12 experts, hoping that at least 6 of them might say yes. To my surprise, all of them said yes. So instantly the workload went up in terms of doing the research for this book, which I really hope to share with you today. Now, I have realized just in the last few minutes that the chat is disabled. So I was going to ask people to share where they're joining from. Can we do that in the Q&A, or is that not going?
Yeah, sure. I have posted a question already in the Q&A asking people from where they have joined, and so they can comment on that section as well.
Okay, so if people could share where you're joining from today, that would be much appreciated. So I know the group that we're with.
And you will find the Q&A section just beside the chat option on your screen.
So I'm seeing Calcutta and Manchester, 2 different sides of the world there. I'm also seeing we've over 30, so I'm hoping that some others will be able to engage there, just to give me a sense of who's with us. What I hope today is to have some questions and to have some conversation. I've watched a couple of the films of this Readers Club and really enjoyed the interactive and conversational nature of some of them. So that's my hope, that I can share and hear from you also as we go. New Delhi, Balochistan.
Algeria as well, Lucy?
Say that again, please.
Margaret has joined us from University of Stirling, Scotland, and Rekia has joined from Algeria.
Ah, So I am maybe not seeing everything as we go. Hello, Margaret. Lovely to see you.
I'm sorry I missed your reading last week with my car trouble, so I was glad I could join in today.
I'm delighted and good to see you in a very sterling looking location there. Absolutely. Okay, thank you. So if I could maybe ask Arnisha if you could just share some of the slides, that would be great. Thank you.
Please let me know, Lucy, when my
So we've got this screen, and I think that's you about to go onto slideshow. Beautiful. And if we could just take it forward.
Sure.
One, that would be great. So that question there, what is a word you would use to describe or explain the word culture? Because culture is our theme. We're talking about cultural intelligence. So what's a word you would use? And please either raise your hand and we can unmute and hear you, or if it could be written into the Q&A. What's a word you would use to describe or explain culture? We've got identity. Absolutely, thank you, Rikia. I think we're getting a sound there. Did somebody wish to speak? Was that? So identity, what other words would you use to describe or explain culture? A social mirror. Thank you, I like that. Of course, one word's really hard. I'm sorry, Ban. I've put that there just to see if people go, if you want to write 2 or 3, I'm not going to stop anyone there. Absolutely not. But yes, norms, social mirror, that idea of looking out, seeing yourself. I like that. What else? Put you on the spot, asking questions rather than just presenting. Diversity. Thank you, Rikia. Yeah, that idea of identity, diversity, social mirror. Does anyone want to unmute and share a thought? You can put your hand up, raise your hand and hear from you. And the words that have been shared, the idea of norms or the social mirror, diversity, identity, these are quite complex words. I often hear words like values or the way we do things around here. Then people often say more than one word and share that. They're quite complex. It's about our behaviours, the way we think, the way we do things. There's so much included in that word culture, and yet we use it quite laxly sometimes. You know, the culture around here is, or their culture is. And Cultural intelligence is about navigating that complexity. So that's the purpose of it. And I've heard the quote around culture not being something that we have, but something that we do, because we're always creating cultures. As soon as we get into groups that keep meeting, we start laying down the norms or how things or what our identity is going to be here. Who is able to speak? Who gets heard? Is there joking? Do we eat? What do we eat? How? All these different factors that play into how we do things. So we are always creating culture. And I often hear people talk about culture as something over there. Well, I need to learn about that culture over there, for example. But culture is within us as well. We have all been shaped probably by many different cultures and groups that we have been part of. So as we are talking, what I would like us to think about when we think about culture is that complexity, how gender, how generation, how social status, all these things come into play when we use the word culture. And so that's what we're often talking about when I'm thinking about the book and how cultural intelligence helps us to navigate that. So we've thought about culture. If I could ask you to move on, please, Arnisha.
Sure.
With the slide. One of the things I really discovered when writing the book is that the process of writing and having my writing edited really made myself more conscious of myself as a reader. And we're in a readers group today, so I just want us to think about that. And there were different ways that this happened. For example, sending out early drafts and getting feedback such as, oh, Lucy, you need to be much more specific about what a reader should do about that story. Or, Lucy, you need to be much less specific. Just tell the story, let the reader decide. And things like talking about the people I'd interviewed, I had to talk about them both as a group and individuals, and a lot of different thoughts on how I should do that, be that informally or talking of experts, which is what I've done, but with a first name. So that's but with a first name going. So you see how culture shapes and often in opposites. And I began to think of myself much more in that reader way as well. Also, what English, I'm writing in English, we're having this session in English, but what English do we usually use? So I think I use British English. That's what I think. I'm aware that I've put notes in the footnotes when I've talked about things, for example, the Cultural Intelligence Centre, with whom I'm a master facilitator. And I've written it in the American because American Centre, ER, rather than RE. And I've just put in a note to ask people what they think about that, because I'm aware that different English sometimes it can have an impact from very little to making us feel quite uncomfortable or that it's wrong. And I think back to when I was young, for example, some of the American English, like gotten, if I said gotten, which is fine in American English, I think that was a word that I would sometimes kind of get a cuff to the back of the head and a chat on how lazy that was. So I've got quite a reaction when I read that word because it's associated with those learning environments in my culture. also say I thought I spoke in British English or wrote in British English, but two of the editors who went through the process of editing the book, the first one came back and the word because was suddenly introduced to my text a lot. And I really didn't like it. I found it was like an argument is how that word sounded to me. So I rejected that edit. But a later editor, he said, oh, I've noticed this Scottish linguistic tick was how he referred to it, as we use as often instead of because. So I'm aware I stuck with the as, writing in my voice, but I'm aware that for certain readers, they might be reading thinking, this should be a different word. So I've suddenly realised where I might have distance from the author, and it's maybe much more conscious of that. And I'm just interested with this group. Are you aware of how culture has shaped how you react to what you read, or where there may be words or phrases or things that sometimes create a kind of different reaction for you? So I'm going to leave that question with you for a second. And what would be great is to hear any voice. If you're able to raise a hand, share a story. As I read this quote that's in the book, I can't adapt the way I use my words to match with your style. I don't know you or how culture may have shaped your preferences. A wise person shared with me that writing is not like training, where you can adapt to the people in front of you. Writing is a one-way conversation. Therefore, I'm asking that you use your CQ or cultural intelligence. When you find yourself thinking, Lucy isn't respectful or humorous or specific or whatever enough, ask yourself, could that be to do with culture? What does it tell you about yourself or suggest about Lucy's culture? Who has thought about how culture impacts them as a reader? Am I seeing Sifa highlighted? Thank you, Anaya. Can you unmute, Anaya?
Yes. So I think what you're trying, if I understood the question correctly, it's like how the culture impacts us as book readers.
Yeah.
So, like for example, I'm an Indian, but I've had a glimpse of other cultures when I stayed out there, and when I read a book, especially, or read about certain things. I think it's very different how we perceive a story, or even if it's it doesn't have to be fiction. Even if it's something non-fiction, it very much affects how we perceive things, how our societal makeup is, or what culture we come from. Sometimes certain things might be very normal over here, not so much. Whether it might be very, like for example, when my daughter was reading Khalid Hosseini, she was very shocked how girls are treated there. So yeah, definitely culture affects how we perceive our writing.
Absolutely, and we'll come back to that, as you said, that way, how we perceive the world. Thank you, Anaya, and what shocks us or doesn't. And when you're young, that bit about it opening up, that things are done differently, you know, when your daughter's reading, for example, that our experience isn't a universal experience, all these different things. And what was considered good value of your time to read, or how books were valued in the family's context that you were in, for example. Thank you. Can I ask to move to the next slide?
Sure.
Thank you, Anisha. The book is about cultural intelligence. Actually, Steve, I see your hand is up. Do you want to speak?
You can unmute and speak, Steve.
Steve, you've got your hand up, but you're still muted. Do you wish to share? Okay. I hope that we'll get to hear from you when you're able. What I want to do is share something of cultural intelligence so you can take that away from this discussion. Some of you, I'm sure, will remember in the 1990s, the millennium bug, the idea that all computers that will, when the year 2000 struck, systems that relied on computing would stop working because they wouldn't recognize the date. So there were lots of experts in the field around the world working to prevent what was considered a potential crisis in the making around the millennium. And one of the people involved in that was a woman in Singapore called Sun Ang. And she was involved in recruiting people and bringing experts together. And in their country, they were often top of field. And what she noticed was that together, they often didn't work well or successfully. Has a decision been made? Whose responsibility is it to carry it out? The outputs didn't seem to match the sum of the parts from the group. And so she became very interested in this hidden part culture and how it was playing out in groups. So now Professor Sun Ang at Nanyang Technological University in Singapore is one of the real thinkers in this field. And she did initial research with Christopher Early, who was then at London Business School, and they discovered there are 4 capabilities that are consistently high with individuals and organizations that relate well and are effective working across cultures. And together, they called them cultural intelligence. So let me share these 4 capabilities with you. And what I do in my work as a trainer, as a coach, as a facilitator, is assess and develop cultural intelligence. So the first capability is about our drive. What's our motivation to even want to be effective across cultures? What's our persistence, our confidence? The second is about knowledge. What do we know about how cultures are similar and different? And what aspects of a situation could or are be about culture? The third capability is called CQ strategy. That's about our metacognition, our ability to think about our thinking, which as readers, we're often quite good at, that idea of thinking about what's going on between ourselves and the pages of a book. So it's about being proactive with our knowledge rather than just reactive, thinking about what our assumptions are, what our awareness is, how are we checking with other people. And then, of course, the adaptability piece. Now, I cannot see you, but I am going to ask you, wherever you are, if you would very kindly fold your arms. I'm just going to put my desk down a bit so you can see me. So I can't see if you're doing them, but I'd like you, and to give a proper tuck, not just to lay them on top of each other. And all I would like you to do is to refold your arms, but with the other hand on top. And I would really love if some of you could maybe unmute and tell me, how does that feel for you? Ben, thank you for putting on your camera and looking so confused. You're muted.
Yeah, just to say, it's funny how you have to consciously think about, I had to consciously think about moving my arm because, you know, it just feels so unfamiliar and unnatural to cross it that way. And the first time I tried to do it, my arm just didn't actually move where I thought it was going to.
didn't want to go, didn't want to do it.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So you used the word norm earlier, and then we have that, but that feels unnatural. That's not right. Anyone else?
You can also switch on your cameras, participants, if that's fine.
Yes, hello. I don't know if I can speak.
We can hear you. Thank you.
All right, thank you. So, like the other speaker, it feels unnatural, but I have seen it from other cultures. For instance, for the Hindus and the Chinese, and the pose of the Buddha. But in my culture, we hardly have any occasion to do like this, except you're really worried. So it's in my culture, it's only when you're really worried that you have your arms folded, and so it feels yes.
So it's a sign of me worrying you that I'm kind of standing with. I'm worried here now. Thank
you. Worried, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And one of the things I'm hoping that you're sensing as well is that if I stood in front of you and shifted how my arms were folded, I suspect you would not notice because it's a small shift. But when you do it yourself, even something quite small can feel uncomfortable, can feel unnatural. And often when there are many cultures, there can be tension. And tension's okay. That's okay for there to be tension. But when we feel that tension, that discomfort, we often get that fight, flight, freeze kind of reaction to it. The kind of, I don't want to do that again. You know, that was too much to think about. We like to stick with what's comfortable typically. And cultural intelligence is about trying to lean into the discomfort a little and think, what is success here if we do well together? What could that look like? You know, that bitter and collaborating. And one of the things I'm very aware of is, for example, I hold trust or a lack of trust for much longer now than I would have before I started developing my cultural intelligence. So elements like that we can hold, that we can explore, all really help us. I said I assess cultural intelligence. I work with the Cultural Intelligence Centre for that. They have assessments. So when I first did an assessment back in 2013, I thought my drive would be my highest capability, my desire to work across cultures, because with the British Council, I had loved being and working with people. I found it really engaging. When I started my own company in 2010, I wanted to keep that element as part of what I did. My CQ drive was okay, but it wasn't my greatest capability. And it really made me pause and reflect and think about what's going on here. And I thought, you know, I've been to France quite a few times on holiday, never eaten snails. Why not? You know, you don't get snails on the menu in the UK typically. So I thought, why am I staying in that comfort zone? So now I have eaten snails, delicious, recommend it if you're ever in France, very lovely. So I'm better at going out of my comfort zone. But also it made me ask quite an uncomfortable question. That question of, do I only like diversity when it's kind of like me? And of course, Rika, you'd said, you know, inclusion. And so this is really important, diversity with inclusion. So absolutely. And it got me thinking about, where am I uncomfortable? Where do I feel that rub? And my background is with public sector, with education, often in business groups, for example, I can feel a tension. And so that bit about, I've been specifically joining business groups that are often just about growth and money, it feels like to me, but I'm really enjoying and learning. Politics, another one, when things are politically very different, I can just go quiet, kind of think I'm going to leave this kind of conversation. And so it's a really useful thing to be able to reflect on your cultural intelligence. Steve, I'm seeing your hand back up. I'm hoping I can hear you this time.
Yeah. Okay. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, Steve. I think we're also hearing maybe from Asif.
I think you have to mute someone.
I have muted Asif for now. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much. Accept my apologies. I had an issue with my laptop. That's why I switched to the phone in order to continue with the session. Regardless to the question you asked before about the culture, so I'm Rwandan, and in Rwandan culture, we don't use the way of like transferring the information in generation to generation was speaking, like oral, without like writing. So that was not that was the result for the Rwandan youth, especially in education, not having that kind of reading the book. So which may come to the question you asked, how you may react to through the culture to and the reading something. So for me, you may be shocked if you had that culture of reading, but as we don't have that culture of reading, is something which they are trying to introduce. As you see, there is no much libraries in Kigali. The way just I found this library, digital library of British Council, was the first time they're introducing in the main library. We had the one public library we had in Kigali. So it's something that we are quite working on, and in case we had someone who can just introducing the way we may just fostering the the youth to have that culture a bit better. Yeah. So yeah, thank you so much. And I think it's very different from other countries, because I have traveling in different country, including European country as France, Belgium, Switzerland, and Italy. Let me just focus on France. In every village, you may just found a small library, which called in French Mediathèque, and also just one office of tourism. So I think it depends of the culture of the country. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Stephen. Absolutely, that bit about what value is given to books, you know, that's part of the whole aspect of it. And one of my interviewees was a Rwandan in Kigali. So great to thank you for that, Stephen. That shapes how we approach things, how we can talk about them with others as well. What we read, often one of the joys of reading is sharing with other readers about what we've been reading, for example. Thank you, Steve. Arnisha, could I ask you to move on a slide?
Sure.
Thank you. I have a question here, and I would love, again, if people could either put it in a comment or just unmute. But if I had a jacket that I took off and dropped on the floor, what shape would that create? Do you have a word for the shape a dropped jacket would make? And every language is different. I am taking from some of the silence that we're not thinking of a word. There's limitations to language, and that's an interesting thought within us as readers. Can I ask you to move this slide again, Arnisha?
Should I go ahead?
Yes, please. So that bit around the limitations, also we're always making meaning of language. And as readers, that's fine. We're alone typically when we're reading, we're making our own meaning. But as soon as there's a group and interaction, so some of the stories I share in the book, for example, is I remember when I was in my 20s working with international students in Scotland and interviewing some Indian students who were right in the centre of Glasgow. I'm from a rural town in the northeast of Scotland, so for me, Glasgow was the big city. And these students were saying, we don't understand where the people are. Where do they go to work? Why is it so quiet? And I was thinking, you're in the middle of Glasgow. What do you mean? I couldn't really understand what they were saying until my first visit to Mumbai. And I suddenly thought, oh, words like busy, words like quiet, they have totally different perceptions, as was shared at the beginning. And I, you know, that kind of idea about what we see of the world. And also thinking about interviewing Justin Ngoga from Kigali in Rwanda. He spoke about when he worked with an American organization in Kigali, they would often say, Justin, do you want to join us for lunch? And he would always decline the conversation. And he said, if they had said, we would like you to join us for lunch, he would have jumped at the chance. He wanted to eat and meet these people more. But that I and we and how we use it sometimes impacts on what we hear. I was interested in writing the book. I often used the word we, and the editors took that out. It was kind of, no, you've got to speak to I. But again, I'm aware that that will have a very different impact on different people. And when we use words like we used at the beginning, like diversity, inclusion, all these different things, success, what does that look like? We can see that there is much more scope for misunderstanding because we're coming with different perspectives. Does anyone want to share a story about how they discovered a different perspective after being curious about how others gave meaning to a word? Or even perhaps the other way, about a story that highlights what can go wrong when words have been used without meaning being explored. And I'm also going to say, Rikia, you asked what does CQ stand for? So CQ is cultural intelligence. And I am sorry, I am getting to some of the answers, Sylvia, and I, and the pile, the puddle, really like that. And I suspect if we went out and asked people to draw a pile, it may not look like a drop jacket if they hadn't seen it. And so it's just interesting how words, they've got borders, they've got boundaries, and we think about them differently. I am not sure, is it Hinan? I can see your hand is up.
Hello, everyone.
Daisy, sorry, I see that.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. I want to share my story about the different misleading of the meaning. You know, I'm from Myanmar, and I studied in India for 4 years. But most of my classmates are African. Okay, some of the African names they start with they are like Lee, L-E-E. Okay, Lee. But you know, in my country, that word L-E-E is like male organ. You know, for me.
Okay. So a very different meaning.
And pronounce their name, you know. I was like, should I call him or not? Because for me, it's really difficult to call that, but to pronounce that word. But like, you know, for him, it's totally fine, you know.
Absolutely. And these kind of things about how, and I'm going to come on to that as well, that bit about what we learn words mean can really impact. And what you said, it was really difficult for you. So even that bit about saying no, if you've been taught not that that's a word you don't use, you know, it can be really difficult to use a word that you've been conditioned to think is not good to use. Now, I am looking at time and I can see, Enas, that you're looking, and I'm going to ask if we can, actually, Enas, can I come with you and hear what you were going to say?
Hello, everyone, and thanks for giving this chance. I just want to ask why the chat is not recognized. I send all the contributions inside the chat. And the second, for the last question, I would like to share you my story with my daughter. I didn't see her from 10 years for some reasons, and she's studying international languages and international education. She understood in wrong way the meaning of plane. She was shocked when I am talking with her about the loving plane. The loving blame, it could be the meaning of assuring the loving feeling between us. But she understood the word in different way, and she was shocked. So the very small difference in meaning or a word can change the relations between humans in unexpected way. Thank you.
Thank you. And absolutely, yeah, that unexpected shift that goes on. Absolutely. Thank you, Ines. And I believe the chat has been disabled and we're using the Q&A.
Yeah.
If you've been finding that hard. Thank you. Arnisha, could I ask us to move into the
Next slide.
next slide, please? So
Sure.
the different meaning of words is a theme that kept coming up again and again in terms of interviews, you know, how we build a sense of understanding, of shared community, all these different things. And it's so easy, as you just shared, and then, you know, to use a word that other people are suddenly, they have quite a shock, or Enas's story there as well, around how we do that. What I have been aware of in writing the book and hearing people respond to me, or what people have got in touch with me about, is, of course, we connect with humans, and people often want to know who it is that's written the book. And so it's been stories about my dad or my family, along with stories from the other interviewees. But this quote here comes right at the end of my acknowledgements. And I've had quite a number of people get in touch with me about how they liked that, about how that spoke to them. So the quote is, at the start, when I first had the idea for the book, I received so much encouragement from Viviane Vicente, a CQ master facilitator. I learned so much from working alongside her and conversations with her. She wanted to read it all, but cancer claimed her faster than I could write. Viviane, you are so missed. I remember when your emails switched from being addressed to Dear Lucy to Dearest Lucy. It went against all my Scottishness to reciprocate. So now, too late, I say thank you, dearest Viviane. And it was that realization, and a lot of people, and I think maybe Scottish people, some of the context. In Scotland, there are 3 official languages, Gaelic, English, and Scots. And in Scots, there is no word for love, I've been told. It's one we've had to adopt from the English. And so that bit about being emotive, showing emotion, it's not often, love is something you do, not something you talk about. So that bit about dearest, even although I knew from my work with the British Council that this was a cultural thing, because I've had colleagues in places when I was working across the Arab world, for example, and it was like saying, you know, you're not just a formal colleague, you're now a friend and colleague. And despite me knowing it was cultural, I felt I really couldn't reciprocate. And I wondered that bit around cultural conditioning, which maybe we've talked about there with some of the examples from you, how it can sometimes stop us acting even when we wish we could. And that's maybe, I don't know if one person would like to maybe share a thought on that. Yes, Anaya.
Yes, there are at times things we do or don't do from our culture, but you know, being a Indian, like every kilometer we have a different language, different food, a different culture. I think we are a bit more adaptable at this part of the world, at accepting and, getting ourselves into the surroundings we are in. So I guess that exposure matters, I guess, when it comes to culture. When you're exposed to a lot of cultures, there may be still.
Your voice has suddenly just disappeared, I think not intentionally.
Being more adaptable.
Thank you, Anaya. Absolutely, that kind of bit and what we are used to in that adaptability piece. And often I hear people when they talk about cultural intelligence, they often say it's natural. However, all of these are capabilities that we can develop, and if we have that bit where it feels natural, it's because we've had the experience that has taken us there, that's enabled us to build that capability. And a useful thing is to think, how can you share that with others who maybe haven't had that experience? Could I ask you to move on a slide? Thank you, Arnisha.
Sure.
Thank you. This was a picture of me at my book launch. I was so delighted. And as I say, I feel so warm to be here at a British Council Readers Club after it. And the quote that Ben kindly shared at the beginning from Baroness Wendy Alexander, who's the Vice Chair at the British Council. And I would very happily take thoughts, comments, or questions. And I'm seeing there's a hand up from Rikia and Anaya. I'm not sure if that's a legacy hand up or you're wishing to ask another. Rikia. Do you wish to share, Rikia?
You are on mute, Rikia, in case if you're speaking.
Can I just say, I'm feeling the love as people put up love hearts. Thank you for that. I'm not sure if we're able to hear from from Rikia, Anandia, with my apologies.
Am I audible?
Yes.
Yes, you are.
Good evening, Lucy. And I'm sorry I joined in a little late because we're still in the office hours back here. So just was finishing on a Friday for the weekend and just joined in late. But from whatever part of the conversations that I caught, there is one thing I'm very curious about with regards to your whatever you uncovered in your journey in search of cultural intelligence. How much of a geographical change do you think is involved when it comes to cultural change within a person itself? Let's say when someone from the tropics moves to, not necessarily emigrates, but maybe even a temporary shift to the higher latitudes or vice versa. So how much of the change of habitat and climate conditions the cultural change? Or do you think it's a relative thing for someone to hold on to a certain cultural practices irrespective of the change of habitat? Or do you think um, it's something that is applicable to all of us? Thank you.
Thank you very much for that question. there are now more than 1,000 peer-reviewed articles about cultural intelligence in lots of different areas. And people who do the cultural intelligence assessment, it's now, I think, about 300,000 people. And part of that is they will say how many countries they've lived in or how many languages they speak. And what appears to be the case is that travel in and of itself doesn't necessarily make you more culturally intelligent. It has to be intention. So you can travel somewhere else and be quite open and curious or not. You may never travel, but you may read very widely and engage with different things and think about that. So there are lots of ways, but the research at the moment does seem to be suggesting that having languages or travel isn't the key. The key is about that intention to want to engage with people and to build these capabilities around it. So that would be my understanding. I hope that gave some answer there. We've got one more question, I think, from Yamin, and then I'll hand back to Ben. Yamin.
Hi, Miss Lucy. Hi, my name is Yami, and I'm from Myanmar. And if I'm not mistaken, I didn't hear that on the last slide of your the question was in the culture, like if you want to change the culture awareness, not awareness, sorry, culture, what would that be? I want to hear from you first before I share my thought. In your country, I mean, Lucy, you're from Scottish, right? Scotland, right? So, what culture what kind of culture you want to change?
For me, it's about people being able to thrive together, whatever, because the culture keeps changing. There's never, so for example, I have 3 sons and they have grown up with technology where they communicate with their friends in a very different way to how I did. When I was growing up, I watched TV. My parents didn't have that technology in their homes. So things keep changing, which change how we engage and see and do things. So culture is never still. So I think for me, it's not about, and what I want is for cultures to enable people to thrive, whoever it is that's making the culture. And I hope that helped Yamin.
Yes, I understand. So, like what I understand from my side is like you're getting not along with the young people. Let's say generation X or Z, it's something like that. For me, I like to see different culture in different country. We learn a lot of things in diversity, and I love my culture, and we have so many culture as well. And some culture I have seen that is not nice, it's not pleasant. It's like, it's not nice to talk about. Let's say when people want to marry, and the lady, they need to offer some big amount of things in some country, which I am not agree with that. But it's culture. I cannot blame it. I cannot blame on that. And something like that. Some country, they can marry 4 wives, and I think most of you know that. So that kind of thing we cannot change, but I wish I could change. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think one of the things is thinking always about what's in our agency. And also, what was the context? Often when we look into what was the historical aspects that created whatever systems, we discover reasons. And I think for cultures, it's the people within them to change. And sometimes from the outside thinking, you know, do we support that or not? It's a very, very complex aspect you've just brought in there, Yamin. But that bit about realizing cultures inside us, that we started with that thought, I think that's always a useful thing to hold on to. And I'm going to say thank you all for engaging and sharing with me. And I'm going to hand back to Ben.
Lucy, thank you so very much on behalf of us all for setting out some really interesting kind of questions as much as answers really throughout this whole really complex but fascinating area. So I'd like to thank you on behalf of all of us here, and also to thank all of us in the Readers Club for also sharing your perspectives. For me, that sense of navigating complexity and being comfortable with feeling a bit uncomfortable is the main thing with all of these aspects of intercultural connections. And I thought that the framework you set out around how much drive we have to engage with people across different cultures, our knowledge, our strategies and actions are really, really helpful, practical ways that we can all reflect on how we do it. And I think not just across cultures when we think about it in terms of nations and ethnicity, but also it works in all different aspects of cultures we work in. It could be our workplaces, how we work with colleagues in different professional disciplines. It could be, as people have touched upon, things to do with intergenerational cultural differences. It could also be, and obviously us as readers of literature from different cultures. And I love that point about, literature, particularly in writing, is a static thing rather than how we all negotiate difference and understanding. I thought that was a really helpful prompt for us as readers of literature from other cultures. We need to be comfortable with the distance that may be there. But thank you so very much on behalf of us all. It was really, really valuable. And thank you so much for everyone for your questions and comments. I'll pass back over.
Thank you, everyone. If you want to read Lucy's book, you can definitely find that in the digital library as well. So people who are not members, it's time for you to take up the membership, and you can get in touch with us at digitallibrary@britishcouncil.org. Thank you for joining with us today. Have a lovely weekend, all of you. Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Lucy, for joining with us.
Thanks all. Have a lovely weekend when it comes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye, everyone.
You.
Bye.
Everyone. Bye.